Hello and welcome back to the Bite-Sized Garden for the final episode on this epic pond build. Yes, I promise it'll finally get finished in this episode. If you haven't seen the other two episodes, I'll put a link to them below. Bite-Sized Garden. So at the end of the last video, I was feeling a little down because I had made the decision to change the liner, and that's not a small thing. It was really frustrating me. Whatever I tried, I could not get the water level to rise up above that downpipe inflow. And I couldn't really rule out a puncture in the lining either. So even though it's going to take a lot of work, I decided that was the best course of action. The first thing to do was to pull out the plants and put them safely in buckets of water out of the sun. Next, I was keen to keep some of the water, not because I was trying to save money or for water restrictions or anything like that, but rather I wanted to save some of the beneficial bacteria that had started to build up in the pond. Then it was time to pull out all the rocks and the gravel. I'll rip through this pretty quickly because it took a couple of hours and honestly it's pretty boring. With the rocks, the pebbles and the plants out, I could use the pump to pump out the rest of the water. Then it was time to cap that downpipe. I learnt my lesson here and now I will never speak of it again. With the old liner out, I wanted a bit more of a hole for the pump to sit in and was keen to straighten up some of the edges, making them as vertical as possible. I highly recommend doing this as it lets you build much more stable rock walls. It was encouraging to see that some of the transplanted irises had already started putting down really good root growth too. And as you can see from above, the definition of those layers is much clearer now that those walls are straighter and more vertical. Now, time for the new liner. When I discovered that EPMD pond liner existed, I knew it's what I should have used at the beginning. It does cost a little bit more, but if you're going to go down this path too, I recommend you go there from the beginning. It's really tough, it's durable, and it's going to last a very long time. Even though it's tough, you still want to make sure that there's nothing sharp underneath. So an underlay or carpet and sand like I've used is a really good idea. And you definitely want to take your shoes off as well. Once that was laid out properly, I put a layer of Hessian down. This helps hide the black pond liner and allows nature to build up its own natural substrate underneath the rocks. It will break down over time, so make sure you use a natural fibre. This time I remembered to install the pump first. I put it inside this pot so I could really easily stack rocks around it and on top without damaging the pump. I covered the bottom with sand and gravel, which helps hide the pipe and gives the rock walls a nice stable base to build from. When trimming back the pond liner, give yourself about 15 to 20 centimetres, 6 or 8 inches or so, overhang from the lip. That way you can mount it up and bury the rest. Despite all the wrong turns and mistakes I've made, I'm really starting to like how this is looking. The rocks are feeling more natural, the plants feel like they belong, and the tier style is so much more stable. So now the interior of the pond is starting to look good, it's time to start working on the lip to make sure the big rocks sit nicely in place. It is a little bit like Tetris getting it right, but do take your time to make sure those rocks sit really well in place. Because despite your best efforts to keep an eye on everything, pets and little people will want to walk around on the lip here, and the last thing you want is for them to be toppling in. There won't be any big rocks here as this is where the pond bridge will sit. I do want there to be some nice soft soil here though, to encourage frogs to burrow and make their homes. I've got another video on the way that shows how to make this bridge. I'll put a link to that in the description below when it's done. Unlike the pond build, it's really easy and I think it absolutely makes the pond. There's still a lot of work to go around the lip, but everything else is starting to look pretty good, so it's time to see how this pond looks with some water in it. I spent a lot of time experimenting trying to get the waterfall working properly, which I do eventually, but I'll go into that a little bit later. Remember how I said I saved some buckets of water to collect that beneficial bacteria that have built up? Well, if you're using mains water, you want to let that water sit for a couple of days before you put anything in the pond, because that helps the chlorine to dissipate. I'm using a mix of rainwater and mains water, mains water is good because it's got some beneficial minerals in it, which you want in the pond, but still I probably should have waited a day or so before I put this water in. Hopefully some of it survived anyway. Now that I can see how the water is sitting, I can start to add some plants in around the water line. Make sure you look at the labels to see where the plants should be sitting in the water, but it will also take you a little bit of time as you learn the water levels as it rises and falls in your pond, because each pond will be slightly different. With most of the rocks around the lip now, everything's really starting to take shape. With the bridge in place, I can now see where my plants are going to go, but I also want to do a little bit of prep underneath for that frog habitat, and also I want to put plenty of rocks around it too, to not only stabilise the bridge but make sure there's lots of protection from cats and birds. The irrigation pipe you can see there is for a simple sprinkler system, just a series of misters that will help the plants around the top in really dry times. The idea is that these plants will be pretty self-sufficient most of the time, but it's easy enough to put this in now and it'll be fun for the kids on those really hot days too. So just a little bit more tidying up to do and the pond is finished. Well, almost finished. It was actually a couple of months before I got the waterfall working exactly as I wanted it to. It turns out that building a waterfall in the middle of a flat pond is not actually that easy, but I wanted to leave it for a few weeks to see how things would settle down. A month later, and I was really pleased with how the water levels were holding up. I did top it up with a little bit of rainwater from my tank, and we also got some decent rain, but overall it was doing really well. All the plantings were really happy and that bridge was looking great. The only thing that I wasn't really happy with was how that waterfall was working, or not working. I had hoped that building a bit of a wall with rocks and gravel and even some of the clay that I dug out, and then wrapping that with leftover pond liner would act as enough of a dam wall to hold the water back and create a bit of an overflow. Unfortunately, the water in my pond had other ideas. It wasn't until I built a proper rock wall and then went all out Hoover Dam with the mortar that I managed to get the desired results. It was pretty nerve-wracking too, because I was trying to get the water level as high as possible in that top pond, and despite doing my best at working out the levels, there was danger of it spilling over in the wrong places. In fact, I had to do a little bit of extra mounding up and mortar work to stop it overflowing on both sides of the waterfall. You won't believe how much this pond makes me happy. Yes, it took so much longer than it should have, and it probably cost me twice as much as it should have, but every time I come out here it puts a smile on my face. That sound of running water, seeing the irises that recently bloomed, it just really makes me happy. It is still a work in progress of sorts. I've recently added some freshwater mussels and some yabbies. They're little freshwater crayfish. I'm just trying to sort of create a real living ecosystem in there, and I'm really hoping that some frogs will turn up here soon too. I will definitely be doing some pond updates in the future, so if you're interested in seeing how everything evolves in the pond, hit that subscribe button and keep an eye out for those. In the meantime, the next job for me is I'm going to start working on the rest of the front yard because it certainly needs it. Thanks for watching, take care out there, and look forward to seeing you next time.